Hi, and welcome to the Revive, Thrive, and Optimize podcast. I'm Billy Weiss, compounding pharmacist, and as always, my great co-host, Janet Miller, and behind the scenes, Magic Mike. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Billy. Good morning, Mike, and good morning, listeners. Just to remind you, please to like and share our podcast, and you can find us on YouTube. So it's been a few weeks. We've been on vacation, and we're so happy to be back. And I've got questions, and I've been talking to lots of people, friends, clients, and students. Billy Weiss, why are we so stressed and depressed? Because I'm seeing everyone so anxious right now, and people can't sleep. They're depressed. They're on meds, trying to get on meds, maybe trying to get off meds, just trying to get control of the craziness going on in the world. How can you help us with that?
That's a tough one, Janet, for sure. I mean, there are so many distractions in our lives today, right? And there is so much media coverage that, you know, you and I grew up in a different time, right? Where there wasn't all the Facebooks and Instagrams and
No, we're pretty
X,
old.
Twitters, whatever they're called now.
We had 3 channels.
Yeah. You didn't have 24/7 news coverage on your phone, on your television, on your Sirius XM radios, right?
And the TV went off at midnight. There was nothing else.
Yeah. So I think that one thing is we've just become more bombarded.
Bombarded's a good word.
With just news all the time. So I think that a lot of these, I'll call craziness in the world was happening, but we weren't necessarily as much aware of it because
we weren't plugged in.
There wasn't the coverage. We weren't
yeah.
plugged in. So I think that plays a role. And I think that when we talk about the importance of sleep and how social media and looking at blue lights and all these things interferes with people's sleep and keeps people maybe up later, worried about it, reading about it, watching it on TV or whatever, listening to it.
Yeah, you brought up a good point. We're so plugged into all that technology now, where we used to be more plugged in just to nature. I think,
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and you add that to the fact that people don't get outside and see the sun as much as we used to, that we don't maybe exercise and are not as active as we used to be.
Our food has changed.
Our foods has certainly changed. So a big part of this is vitamin and mineral deficiency. Hormones are dropping, pretty fast in men and women. Over each decade, we see, levels go down. So I think there's a lot of environmental factors. There's the social media factors. And then there are the fact, unfortunately, I believe, that there are so many substances available today that weren't available or not as readily available, certainly maybe not some of them legalized,
right,
that can lead to depression and anxiety when people think they may be using them to ease their depression and anxiety. Alcohol certainly is one of those things that people may use to try to alleviate some of that. So, Janet, I think it's multifaceted, and I think that it is something that needs to be addressed because we see more and more prescriptions in America for depression pills called SSRIs.
So that's a good question for me to ask you. What are some of these prescription drugs that you see commonly that are for depression and anxiety? What are they called? What are some of them? And what do they do to us over time?
Yeah, well, some of the most common are the SSRI.
What does that stand for?
Class. So selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And that's a fancy way for saying that they block the brain's ability to take serotonin away. So it keeps it there. It blocks the reuptake's what it's called. And serotonin
is made in our gut pretty much.
Over 90% or 95% of the serotonin we produce is made in the gut, not in the brain. These drugs kind of hold it there. Okay. And so the most common ones are Prozac, Zoloft, Celexa. Those are probably the most common ones we think of today. And most of them, or all 3 of those, now come in generic forms. So we, and those would be Prozac is fluoxetine, Paxil is paroxetine, and what was the Zoloft is sertraline. So those are, if you're on one of those names, that would be an SSRI. It just wouldn't be the brand name at this point.
And why do they get prescribed, and how long are you supposed to be on them?
Well, Janet, that is very subjective. So they, if a person is diagnosed with type 1 or type 2 diabetes, there are tests, right? We can run tests. We can check your blood sugar, your A1C. We can even check your insulin level, which we've done maybe too many podcasts on. But you can test for that. But with depression and anxiety, it's more up to the prescriber. And so really, it's diagnosed by asking a few questions. And if they meet a certain criteria, say, I think for depression, if they meet 5 out of 9, they say, well, you're depressed. And so they never typically look at the underlying cause, though, right? They just say, here's a drug. And the problem is, Janet, that those drugs are now, the estimates are that about 20% of Americans take an SSRI daily.
Wow.
And it doesn't really solve any of the underlying issues, right? Now, I should be really clear right here. If you are one of the 20% using one of these drugs, please hear me. I am not a doctor. I am not telling you to stop the drug. The drugs do have lots of side effects that we're going to talk about. And it would be great if you wanted to try to get yourself off the drug, but you need to do it very slowly with the help of your physician. But I think there are some steps you have to take before you even think of that.
Oh, okay. So if somebody's been on one of these drugs for a while, they're wanting to get off of it. And I know I can think of several cases right now of friends that are on Prozac or some type of antidepressant, and they don't feel it's working anymore, but they don't know how to get off of it. And one of the side effects is that they're gaining lots of weight. So would they come talk to you about nutritional support, or go to their doctor, or work together with you guys? How do you get off of it? What's the danger?
Yeah, certainly for the nutritional support, I'm going to say their prescriber is probably not going to be the expert in that at all. So yes, that's where I was going to say, before they even think about trying to come off of one of these drugs, I think they have to fix some of the more common causes of things. So vitamin and mineral deficiencies can lead to depression and anxiety. Protein deficiency can lead to depression and anxiety because that's one of the major ways that we make the neurotransmitters such as serotonin in our brain, and dopamine, and all these this symphony of neurotransmitters. So we need the right vitamins and minerals. We need the right protein.
Well, I think they'd need to heal their gut also.
Absolutely. When you consider 95% of the serotonin is made in the gut, that's obviously important.
If you got leaky gut,
think if they have leaky gut, if they're on omeprazole, Nexium, Prilosec, one of those drugs, and most people are on them long term. Again, not supposed to be on them more than 12 weeks, according to the manufacturers. We need to address all those things, and then we need to look at their hormones. Because the hormones play a critical role in the production, again, of these neurotransmitters. And we've seen that decade over decade over decade, men's and women's hormone levels are decreasing at earlier and earlier ages. So these things need to be corrected, I think, before, or certainly as part of a plan to try to discontinue one of these drugs.
Okay.
Now, the reason that I think that it's important to understand how the drugs work and understand the side effects that are well documented. Okay, these are not made up by Billy and Janet. These are the documented side effects of these drugs that nobody is ever told about when they go on them. So you talk about weight gain. Well, one of the reasons that could be contributed to the weight gain with these drugs, and that is very common, is that these drugs really numb the person. They numb your emotions. And so you don't seem to care as much. And it may be an unconscious don't care as much. But a lot of people eat emotional eating, right? Because they're depressed. Well, now you're numb. And so one of the major things that we see happen with these drugs is they just they make you kind of indifferent. And so when you think about the fact that some of the things that are listed as side effects is,
what are some of the
well, they have some
side
emotional disconnection would be one, where they get to a point where if their spouse gives them a hug or a kiss or grabs their hand, they don't feel the same thing that they used to feel. Or their kid or their grandkid gives them a hug. Imagine just going,
That would make me more depressed.
Right. And Janet, that is what happens a lot of times. So then they just, it will lead to more eating, more depression, more drugs.
So it's more like I guess in life there's highs and there's lows, but when you're on an SSRI, it's more the highs and the lows kind of go away and you're just
you're kind of indifferent.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So it just kind of numbs the things rather than correcting whatever's going on. And then, one of the things that they talk about, probably 70% or more of the people that are on one of these SSRI drugs, they have sexual dysfunction. It's called
like ED or?
Well, that's one of the symptoms. They call it PSSD. And that's post-SSRI sexual dysfunction.
Oh, wow.
Now,
never heard of that.
That can be erectile dysfunction, just complete loss of interest.
The oxytocin's not.
Yeah, I don't know that I can't directly relate it to oxytocin, but that's a really good theory. I don't know that they say why.
But libido basically
flattens out. Again, they don't get the same feeling that they were getting before, which I
guess you just kind of don't care.
You don't care because you're indifferent. Yeah. And then they're kind of numb to the feelings of it. And actually, the literature calls it genital numbness or something to that effect. And unfortunately, for some of these people, these side effects can be permanent.
Wow!
So they don't
don't
always go away when the person comes off the drugs. There are actually now some doctors who specialize in trying to help people get off these type of drugs and try to overcome these types of more permanent, what can be more permanent side effects.
But isn't it also true that you get on one med and then that stops working, so then they put you on another one and another one?
That is
they up the
part
dose?
Of the problem is these drugs don't work long term. And so they do increase the dosage, and then maybe they add an antipsychotic, and then maybe they add a benzodiazepine for anxiety.
And that's really dangerous.
So now we got more things that are really hard to get off of. One of the really disturbing things about this, Janet, is that, again, nobody tells anybody, right? Nobody that I know of has heard of PSSD. Even I would challenge any pharmacist to tell me what that is. If I said, hey, what's PSSD? And they'd say PTSD. I'm like, no, PSSD. I'm going to tell you that I don't think the doctors, the prescribers, the pharmacists, I don't think they know it exists. And I'll tell you another reason that they don't know it exists is because the drug companies...
They don't want you to know.
Don't want them to know it.
Right.
Right. And so it's just not... It's not common.
So when the doctors are educated from the pharmaceutical companies how this drug can help someone, they're not told the whole entire truth. Or it's...
No, they get the highlights of the good things. Of course. I mean, I always say drug, and I don't mean any disrespect to anybody who could be listening to this who is a drug rep, but they're more cheerleaders for the drugs than they are
Gotcha.
to give
Right.
real, I think, medical information.
And then they're sincerely thinking they're helping.
and they sincerely have been taught that, and that's what they believe. I get it, but nobody ever delves into these side effects. So one of the really things that they're discovering, and you talk to some of these people who deal with these people who've been on them and trying to help them get off, is these people now, let's say that, you've been married to your wife for however many years and you're sexually attracted to them, and now you're on this drug, and the longer you're on the drug, the less sexually attracted you become, to the point that you don't care. And they
Meanwhile, my wife's going through menopause, and then she doesn't care either, and then divorce.
They talk about how these men will now start to question their sexuality.
Oh, okay.
Or these women will start to question,
Yeah.
Am I, am I
Yeah.
crazy?
Right.
Am I, what
That
is it?
feeling is not there anymore.
The feeling is the attractiveness to the opposite sex is not what it once was.
Right.
And they wonder why, right? And so they start to question themselves. And when we think about 20% of America being on it, it's kind of scary.
It's a big number.
One of the side effects is it can create manic episodes. So rather than look in and say, hey, maybe the Prozac or one of those drugs has caused the manic episodes, they'll say, well, you're bipolar. We need to put you on some drugs for that too.
Wow.
So it just goes totally overlooked, right? And so now they're on something for bipolar. They're on,
They're spiraling down the rabbit hole when you got to address the nutrition and the activity and your sleep and everything else before just getting on another drug. That's scary.
And Janet, one of the things that's always bothered me that is more well known is that these drugs, certainly in 25 and under years old, increases suicide rates, but they even have shown that in above 25, 26 and above, over time, these increase the suicide rates. And that's because it causes, I just don't care.
Right.
I just don't feel, I don't have my normal emotions. So there's no nostalgia. They talk about one of the things they talk about, say maybe a movie used to
Make you
bring
cry.
you back to your childhood or whatever, and you just
disconnected.
You're disconnected. That's a perfect word for it. You're disconnected from your emotions of the past. You're disconnected from your emotions of the future. They've actually done studies and shown that a couple of things that I think are really important. They've done studies and shown that the MRI studies that the brains of people who have been on SSRIs are changed.
Wow, permanently.
We assume
Okay.
At this point that would be permanent changes in the brain function, the brain firing, and they've shown this conclusively. The other thing that is disturbing to me is they've done studies on serotonin levels, and they've never been able to show any difference between depressed and non-depressed patients.
Oh, wow.
And to pile on to this while we're going, the way that these drugs are presented to the medical community, to the prescribers, is that there's more depression in those that are not on the drugs than those that are. Now, the way they can justify saying that is they will put people in the studies. What they typically will do is they'll take, let's say, 500 people. They put 500 people on Prozac or one of those drugs. And then after 6 months, they take a group and either take them off or move them to a placebo. And so 250 are now off or on a placebo. 250 are still on the drug. And they'll say, okay, in the Prozac group, there's, 5% depressed symptoms. In the group that's off of the drugs or on the placebo, there's 7% depression symptoms. What they fail to completely take into account is that the withdrawal from these drugs leads to the very symptoms that they ask about in their surveys. And nobody ever takes that into account, right? And these people don't even necessarily know they've come off the drug. So they think their symptoms are caused, by whatever was there.
So what are some of the withdrawal symptoms from going off these drugs or not properly tapering off of them?
Yeah,
that sounds like it could be scary.
Depression,
Yeah.
a feeling of hopelessness, loneliness, wondering again, questioning why you don't feel the way you used to feel. These are very real things and need to be done properly and with the help of the right team in order to get off these. So that's why we want to think of things like the foundational 4. We want to think of optimizing vitamin D. We want to think of the whey protein and optimizing protein. We want to think of, especially in women, we want to think of progesterone, testosterone, estradiol. With men, we want to think a lot about testosterone. And for men and women, we need to make clear, and we've talked about this in some of the hormone classes podcasts, but dopamine is produced from testosterone in a large part. So when testosterone levels go down in both men and women, we have lower dopamine, and then that can very well lead to depression and feeling of hopelessness and the things you would think of when you think somebody who passes the questionnaire for being depressed.
Right.
So we need to take all this into account. Not seeing the sun, can lead to this. That's why in places where there's not as much sunlight or it rains more, there's typically you'll see a pattern of higher suicide rates. And the really sad part is, Janet, as more and more Americans have gotten on these drugs, and as more and more prescribers are prescribing these drugs, we see more and more suicides. The suicide rates are going up, I should say. We see more evidence of different events of people that commit these heinous crimes. Oftentimes can be on some of these drugs. So we just need to take a step back and look at what's going on. And I think just like with every other problem we talk about or condition that we deal with, we need to look at how do we use our nutrition, our supplements, our food, our water, our exercise, our hormones, our sleep to help correct these.
Well, and we're talking about being disconnected and being depressed. And then on the other side of that, or maybe it's the same thing, but it's the anxiety and the constant, people are drinking caffeine all day long. They're eating food without nutrition. They're on Facebook 24/7. Then they can't sleep at night and their circadian rhythm is off, and then their hormones are off. And there's this place where they have to go talk to somebody or get on a drug because they cannot stop their brain. Like they can't get any rest and you can't make a decision. And that noise in between your ears, which is why I do yoga, and breathing exercises and things like that, like they can't control the anxiety.
Yeah, I call it mind chatter.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
mind chatter. People say, I just can't turn it off. And I get that.
Yeah. So is that kind of the same thing, Well,
I think it is because, we talk about our 5 organic chelated salt magnesium. We talk about L-theanine. We talk about getting out in nature, taking a walk.
Getting your circadian rhythms back, getting the blue light off.
Janet, when you talk about that, it's very important because over half the people that go on these drugs are on them for over 5 years.
And how long should you be on them?
Well, again,
what does the manufacturer say?
There's never been any trials over 12 weeks. So you think about it, we're going to leave somebody on these drugs indefinitely and keep increasing their dose and maybe adding other drugs or other classes of drugs. And there are no long-term studies on this. And we do know that it creates the emotional disconnection. We do know that it creates the sexual dysfunctions. We know that it creates the increased rates of suicide. We know that it numbs you to all these things. Now, one thing that's really disturbing to me is that most of these drugs are prescribed to women. The majority,
More
I shouldn't
so
say
than
most,
men.
the majority, more so than men. We know that these
Because
drugs,
of perimenopause and menopause?
well, it's not just menopausal women, and that's where I'm going with this line of talking here, is that we know that this drug, these class of drugs, SSRIs, psychotic drugs, those drugs pass easily through the placenta.
Okay.
So-
it's going into the baby.
These children that are in the wound are taking some of these drugs in for sure. And again, we can show on the MRI scans that it changes
Wow.
the functions of their brain. And they're doing some more newer mice studies on this and showing some pretty, and now these are rat studies, don't get me wrong, but there's probably enough evidence at this point to say, hey, it's going to create some changes in that child's
Wow.
brain that maybe we want to try to avoid. So I just think, again, not trying to be critical of anybody on one of these drugs. It's not uncommon, 1 in 5 people. But we need to be educated, right? And that's what I always try to talk about,
Yeah.
is how
Education.
our job is to educate people so that they can make the right decisions for what they think is best, and then to guide them on how to do
it.
that.
Which is, and just brings me back again. I've said it over and over again, why it's so important to take your class. You know, people think, I don't want to go take a nutrition class for a
Yeah.
whole entire weekend, but it's not just about nutrition. It's
Yeah.
bringing all these things up that you're talking about today that are so important and will affect our kids, our grandkids,
Yeah.
and everyone that we're around.
Well, Janet, the other thing that they can do is, and I do believe, I'd have to look at a calendar. I don't think I have it memorized, but I think it's January 10th and 11th this coming up for the summit weekend. It's not the very first weekend of the new year, because I think the first is on like a Thursday or so. So we're going to wait till the
Second
following.
weekend.
But they can certainly do a consult with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, it's crazy, but you said we were both kind of on different vacations, but Beth and I actually ran into a couple from Alabama while we were traveling and got to talking, and they asked what we did, of course. And, you know, I told them, and I ended up doing a consultation with this lady. And, you know,
Always working while you're on vacation.
well, it was something that I felt was the right thing to do. It was that, you know, and then we start talking, and she had kind of, you know, long story short, lost hope. And come to find out, she's on an SSRI along with some other medications. But this is a serious problem, is my point. And so I see it a lot.
Well, and I know that we're running out of time, but what I'd like to bring up, and maybe we do it in the next episode, is that, you know, people are sort of bypassing going to the doctor and getting on an SSRI and instead trying alcohol, or you can go to any corner and get THC or CBD, and they're thinking that that is going to be a more natural way to help themselves. And now I'm seeing so many people addicted to that, and then trying to get off of it. The side effects
We definitely
are crazy.
need
I'd love
to
to
do one
get
on
your take on that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so it
Tough
looks
subject,
like,
but hopefully,
yeah.
you know.
Well, let's do part 2 and let's keep going.
Yep. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.